Secretary Carter, in his testimony yesterday, reaffirmed that the United States, along with its coalition partners, is at war with ISIS. Does President Obama conceive of himself as a wartime commander-in-chief?
I guess you'd have to ask him that direct question. We've been saying for more than a year now.
Evidence to you in your dealings with him?
Well, I think that based on the fact that he gave an Oval Office address to the country to talk about the significant military steps that have been taken against a terrorist organization with whom we're at war, I suppose you could apply that label to him with a lot of credibility. But in terms of how he considers himself and how he would describe his own posture, you'd probably have to ask him that.
You, for example, would not quarrel with my describing him as a wartime commander-in-chief?
Well, again, we've acknowledged for more than a year that ISIL has declared war on the rest of the world, and the United States is leading the effort to degrade and ultimately destroy them. So I think if you were to use that description, it would be reasonable.
I know that yesterday you did quarrel with the assertion that there was a flat contradiction between the President telling ABC News that ISIS was contained, and Secretary Carter flatly telling the Senate Armed Services Committee yesterday that it is not contained. You asserted there is no contradiction there because of what the President meant. So just to clarify, when the President said that ISIS was contained just a few hours before the Paris attacks, he wasn't referring to the group's geographic reach or terror capabilities, but rather to, in essence, their office space.
I think the President, if you go back and look at the transcript, you don't have to discern what the President meant. You can actually look at what he said. And he did make a specific reference to the fact that the amount of territory that ISIL has been able to take over in Iraq and in Syria has been contained and, in fact, rolled back because there's about 25% of the populated areas that they previously controlled have now been taken or retaken by Iraqi forces and by some opposition fighters inside of Syria.
But is it appropriate to use the word contained when, just a few hours later, they demonstrated their ability to cause mass casualty attacks on the homeland of one of our chief allies in this war?
James, the reason that the President ordered military action against ISIL in the first place is because the President was concerned about the territory that they had taken over inside of Iraq and in Syria, and the President was concerned that they would use that safe haven to carry out attacks against the United States or our allies or our interests around the world. So this is the very reason that we are engaged in a campaign right now that is making progress to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL.
Can you provide a historical analog when, in recent memory, a wartime commander-in-chief issued publicly an assessment of enemy strength that was so directly undercut in sworn testimony by the top civilian commander at the Pentagon?
Well, James, as I pointed out, I don't agree with your assessment that what Secretary Carter had to say undercut what the President had to say. Mary?
Josh, when it comes to the omnibus, the Speaker said today he's not going to